Three South Florida nursing schools were shut down due to selling over $100 million in fake nursing diplomas.
Operation Nightingale. It involved nursing schools in Florida selling fraudulent diplomas and transfers across the country. The alleged conduct by these individuals and those who received the fake documents is an affront to Florence Nightingale.
If you're a nurse who attended a nursing school that's being investigated, or if you received a letter from your board, this video is for you. Across the country, nurses are learning that their licenses may be at risk because of Operation Nightingale, a federal investigation into fraudulent nursing schools. Many of these nurses did nothing wrong. They believed they were taking legitimate courses from legitimate schools, passed the NCLEX, and in some cases even started working. Yet today, their careers are being questioned. My name is Nick Dogle, professional licensed defense attorney with North State Law. Our firm focuses exclusively on defending professionals' licenses, especially nursing licenses, when they are under investigation and facing disciplinary action. A nursing license is being reviewed because of Operation Nightingale or because of the nursing school that you went to. It is critical that you seek counsel and obtain representation as soon as possible. So what is Operation Nightingale? This was an FBI investigation that started roughly around 2019, 2020 that focused on what are called fraudulent nursing schools. So that would be schools that nurses, whether an LPN or a prospective RN, attended to become a nurse in the future. So let's say you attended a school, I'll pick Florida because there's been a lot of fraudulent nursing schools down in Florida. You attend one of these schools and the school says, all right, well, you do XYZ, you take these courses, and then you can do, this will count towards your clinicals, for example. That seems to be a big issue, is that the clinicals weren't done or they weren't done properly, or the record keeping for the clinicals was not done correctly. So what ends up happening is prospective licensee, the student, goes to one of these fraudulent nursing schools. They do the curriculum. They end up, a lot of times they'll do something, either actual clinicals or something that's similar to clinicals. Or sometimes they are told that what they did is clinicals, even though it might not be. And then the person graduates and gets a diploma, and then they're gonna go from there. Well, Operation Nightingale was the FBI-led investigation that uncovered a lot of these fraudulent nursing schools. So what they would do is they would do criminal complaints against a lot of those that were involved in the actual school. Sometimes they would do criminal complaints against the students as well for submitting fraudulent documentation to take the NCLEX and to try to get licensed. That's happened multiple times, and we'll get into going forward why I've seen major issues with a lot of this when it comes to the boards. I've also seen some students that should have had their antenna up and should have known better, or maybe they did know better and they just turned a blind eye to certain things. Those are going to be particular situations where the board is not going to back down. They're not going to either issue the license, or if they have issued the license, sometimes they'll implement some other discipline. It really depends on the circumstances, and we'll get into a little bit more detail further on in the video. So one of the things that we've noticed over the years is that when nurses are signing up to be students at some of these so-called fraudulent nursing schools, a lot of times they're actual victims of fraud themselves. Even though when the North Carolina Board of Nursing implements a complaint against them, they call it fraud. They say that sometimes licensee or purported licensee, the applicant, had filed their documentation and applied fraudulently with the board. And when I have a problem with it is when it's clear that the student was the actual victim of fraud. What we've seen a lot of times is people that come over from a foreign country, their English is not really very good. They don't know any better. They sign up. A lot of times these schools will be on the approved list for whichever state. Like in North Carolina, a number of the Florida schools had been on the approved list for the North Carolina Board of Nursing. So if somebody goes and they look up like, all right, well, is XYZ school in Florida on the approved list for North Carolina? Oh yeah, it is. I'll go ahead and go to that school. They'll do that. And then in my opinion, I don't see how they're not victims of fraud at that point, because you are vetting those schools through the North Carolina Board of Nursing through their website. And you're seeing on there like, yep, this school is on the approved list, unbeknownst to the student, potential licensee, and the Board of Nursing. It looks like that school was legitimate. After the student/licensee goes through the whole process, and in some cases ends up being licensed, whether it's North Carolina or a different Board of Nursing, they may be subject to discipline at that point. So it can seem, and it is sometimes, pretty unfair. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, though, we have seen where people knew that the school was fraudulent. They knew they didn't do their clinicals, and they still submitted all the documentation and affirming that, all the required subject matter that was required by the school and by the Board of Nursing was done, like the clinicals, for example. So while we have seen a number of instances where the student, in our opinion, and from what we've been able to see, has been a victim of fraud, we've also seen the other side of it, where the purported licensee or person that actually ends up getting licensed did actually know what was going on and was somebody that was participating in the fraud themselves. So a little bit of both that we've seen. I will say that it does seem a bit unfair that if somebody's a victim of fraud themselves, they spent a lot of money to go to one of these nursing schools not knowing that it wasn't a real accredited, legitimate nursing school. It seems that they got taken advantage of, not only from that particular entity, but they get caught up in an FBI operation, unbeknownst to them, that was going on, and unbeknownst to them that they were somehow a participant in this fraud. And then they further have an issue with the Board of Nursing after, in a lot of cases, actually passing the NCLEX, and even in some cases, having worked as a registered nurse or an LPN for 12, 18 months, 2 years. We've seen that happen multiple times. And then the Board of Nursing does end up finding out that they went to one of these fraudulent nursing schools, and then they will come and have a complaint against him and then go forward. So again, that's where I get into the unfairness of it on a lot of respects, to be honest with you. So let's talk about the real consequences for nurses. So as I mentioned just a moment ago, some nurses, they'll go through the whole process. They'll go through one of these schools, they'll pass the NCLEX, and maybe they'll even get a job. So once a board finds out about it, what exactly are we looking at? So first off, you're likely to lose your job. If you've been working as an RN or an LPN, and then there is a complaint by the Board of Nursing, they are likely to contact your employer. If the employer finds out that you were caught up in Operation Nightingale and the board has filed a complaint, because they can unilaterally do that, most of the time the employer will let you go. It's just not worth it to them, and they don't want to kind of be caught in the middle of it, so to speak. Fair or not, that's just the reality of the situation. So when you're dealing with the actual board, as I mentioned before, you are likely to be facing discipline. We have seen it where some people can get what's called a non-disciplinary consent order. That's not super common in these particular cases. That is actually pretty rare. Public reprimands are pretty common. License suspension is common. License revocation is pretty common. And again, it all depends on your situation and what documentation that you can show to, hey, I did these clinicals, here's all my proof, or I took these classes, here's my transcripts. So the better documentation you have to back up what you actually did, even if it was a quote unquote fraudulent nursing school, the better off you're going to be, because then you can have a better argument and show, hey, I was more of a victim of this fraud than an active participant. Here's my actual proof. So let's talk about how nursing boards handle investigation. So when I talk about nursing boards, here at North State Law, we've done a ton of North Carolina Board of Nursing cases, and that's the board I'm going to be talking about because that's the license that we have. It's in North Carolina, and that's a board we've been in front of the most. So with the North Carolina Board of Nursing investigative process, this can be for anybody that is caught up in the Operation Nightingale, or this could be somebody that already has a license and it's a separate issue and there's a complaint filed against that person. So the investigative process for either one of those, as long as your license, is going to be the same. So The investigator is going to reach out to as many witnesses and facilities as possible to acquire as much documentation and statements as they possibly can before they speak with the licensee. The reason they do that is they want to be in control. They want to tailor their questions off of the information that they already have. It's a pretty common investigative technique. That's why they do it the way that they do it, and it's effective. So you are not, as the licensee or prospective licensee, allowed to see any of the documentation unless you agree to an interview. And you have to agree to an interview at the board's office in order to be able to see that documentation. If you hire an attorney, you can do the investigative interview remotely, and your attorney can review the documentation and then speak with you prior to the actual interview with the investigator. It's very, very key to be able to actually see the documents that are related to your case for obvious reasons. And those obvious reasons are so you can kind of gauge what type of questions are going to be asked of you, and you can kind of see what exactly you're looking at, because a lot of times you're kind of in the dark about, what's going on. I got a limited amount of information. I think the complaint may have come from here. I think it might have come from there. If it's an Operation Nightingale type of complaint, you have a good idea of what the complaint is about. So seeing that type of documentation might not be as key as a different type of complaint, but you still want to see the documentation because there might be some information in there that could be helpful to you. Also, there could be information that could be bad for you, and you really need to see that either way. So once you do the investigation interview with the investigator, then that investigator will do an investigative report. He or she will schedule a time where all the investigators and attorneys with the board will meet. They'll go over a lot of their cases, including yours, and they will come up with a recommendation. The recommendation could be a long line of things. It could be a dismissal. It could be a private letter of concern, non-disciplinary consent order, public reprimand, suspension. And in the case of Operation Nightingale cases, it also could be a revocation of the license as well. From there, they offer that recommendation to you, the licensee, and then you can decide if you want to take that or if you want to move on to the next step, which could be a couple of different options: settlement conference, or you could go the route to have a contested hearing. If you are seeking the license and you're denied, you do have a right to appeal that. You can go through a licensure review panel, and then you can actually have a hearing in front of the board if you're denied again through the LRP. So that's the long and short of it, an investigative process, and a little bit extended beyond that when it comes to the North Carolina Board of Nursing. So let's talk about why you need a professional licensed defense attorney to help with your nursing license case. So here at North State Law, as I mentioned before, we have represented a large number of nurses in the state of North Carolina. So we know the process, we know the players, which would be the investigators, the attorneys, board staff. We communicate with them regularly. We communicate on your behalf with board staff. We keep a running dialogue with them. We make sure that all deadlines are met. We make sure that we stay on top of scheduling interviews or settlement conferences. Whatever needs to be done, we're on top of it. We communicate with the board and their staff for you to make sure that that's taken off your plate so you can focus on your job. Remember, if you have a license and there is a complaint filed against you, you can still keep working. It doesn't mean that you have to stop working unless there is a suspension that is in effect or a revocation into effect. You can still keep working. So we take that worry off your plate. The communication is done by us. Scheduling in conjunction with you is done by us. We get everything taken care of. We get you prepped for the interviews. We get you prepped for settlement conferences. We get you prepped for hearings. Anything that you need to be prepped for, we help you out. We know the process like the back of our hand, and we've done this for a number of years, and the Board of Nursing in North Carolina is the board that we've been in front of the most, hands down. If you're a nurse who's been investigated under the Operation Nightingale or attended a nursing school that's been under investigation, you may assume that your career is over. Don't make that assumption. You may have mitigation, you may have a case, you should have your case evaluated by a competent attorney that knows exactly what the process is with the Board of Nursing, that's seen this particular situation over and over and over again, and is equipped to evaluate your case and does so frequently and thoroughly. At North State Law, we defend nurses and other professionals when their careers are on the line and their licenses are in jeopardy. Please give us a call or a text at 919-521-8810, and you can get a free 15-minute discovery call so we can help evaluate your case and see if we'd be able to help you. Again, that's 919-521-8810 for a free 15-minute discovery call. Thank you so much for taking care of North Carolina. I hope everybody has a fantastic day. Bye-bye.